Okay, hi everyone. This is Mike Kelly from Ford speaking. Thank you all for calling in and welcome to our first City One Indianapolis Challenge webinar. Um, I'll lead you through some slides, and just so you know, I'll be recording this session as well so that we can post it to the website. So without further ado, I'd like to first introduce Ron Gifford from the Central Indiana Community Foundation to give an introduction. Ron?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to say on behalf of the City of Indianapolis, the Central Indiana Community Foundation, Indigo, Cummins, and all of our other partners, we're really grateful for your interest in the challenge and being part of us today. This diverse group of civic and business and government leaders in Indianapolis has created an initiative about 18 months ago called the Personal Mobility Network. And we know that affordable, efficient, and accessible transportation options are key to the residents of our community having access to educational and economic opportunities, to healthcare, and to a better quality of life. And we also know that many of our residents don't have that access. So the goal of the Personal Mobility Network is to connect and enhance our existing mobility options and to find and create new options so that we establish this connected network that provides efficient, affordable, accessible, and equitable transportation options for everyone in Indianapolis. And we're really excited to partner with Ford on the City One Challenge because this community-centered design process fits into that overall initiative really well, because it will allow us to identify these innovative proposals and creative ideas, and ultimately to pilot the most compelling of those as a way then to help us make Indianapolis a better place for all of our residents to live in and to play in and to work in and to do all of the things here that are necessary to have a great quality of life. So the challenge aligns perfectly with our broader goals. We're really excited that you and others are interested in the challenge and potentially submitting your proposals that we'll have an opportunity to look at down the road. And we're really grateful to Ford for partnering with us and helping to make this opportunity available. So I'll turn the presentation back over to Mike at this point. Later on in the presentation, if there are questions I can answer, I'll be online to do that. So again, thank you so much for being part of this. We're really excited about your ideas and your proposals and your thinking on this.
Great. Thank you, Ron. And now I'll do a quick walkthrough of the agenda. First, I want to introduce exactly what the challenge is. Some of you may already know, but for those of you who are new, I'll explain what that process looks like. Then we'll dive into the challenge question and opportunity areas. So these are the areas that we're actually soliciting applications and proposals to address. And we'll go into some instructions on how to actually apply, and then we'll go into a Q&A. And so as you all are muted, I want to point out that if you have any questions along the way, please go ahead and type them in the chat function on the WebEx, and we'll be monitoring, and we can address those at the end. All right, so what is the City One Challenge and why is it important? So again, I'm Mike. I work at Ford, and I am one of the project leads for the City One Challenges. So the City One Indianapolis Challenge is done in really close partnership with, as Ron mentioned, the Central Indiana Community Foundation, Indigo, and Cummins as well. Let's go to the next slide. So the idea of the challenge is that we first want to engage communities to understand their needs and mobility challenges so that we can identify opportunity areas for mobility improvements. Then once we identify those challenges, we invite entrepreneurs to co-design solutions. And then finally, we go through a rigorous selection process where we ultimately select one or two ideas who can receive up to $100,000 in funding to actually pilot their challenge. And we're really excited this year to be able to say that we will also have all of the winners will have the opportunity to pitch to either the the Ford Social Impact Fund or the Ford X Accelerator for further potential investment. Moving on, so the timeline for the Indianapolis Challenge, right now we're in the proposed phase, which is where we're actually asking entrepreneurs, innovators, residents, anyone who has an idea for addressing those mobility challenges that we've been seeing. So currently we have a lot of great ideas, and the application period is open for a little over a month more. And after that, we move into the refine phase, which is where a steering committee will review all of the proposals and select up to 12 finalists who will get to build out a more detailed proposal. So these finalists can participate in a workshop that we'll be hosting about halfway through the refine phase, and they'll also be paired with mentors from Ford, from our corporate partners, and from other experts who can help them as they transform their ideas into really clear and viable pilot proposals. And lastly, the finalists will also have a stipend of $2,500 in order to help to build out that detailed pilot proposal, meaning to help you build a small-scale prototype, to perform customer discovery, or whatever you might have to do in order to develop a more viable proposal. So that phase lasts about 6 to 7 weeks. And then on September 11th, we have the select phase, which is once we have all the detailed pilot proposals from the finalists, a panel of judges will evaluate those proposals and interview the finalists as well against the evaluation criteria, which we'll get into later. And then they'll select the 1 or 2 winners who will receive that funding. Then after that, we enter into the pilot phase, which is, of course, where Ford will enter into a contract and a statement of work with the winner in order to actually get a pilot on the ground. All right, so now we're getting into the challenge question and the opportunity areas. So from our research that we did during the Explore phase, we came up with this challenge question that you see here in bold, which for Indianapolis is how might we integrate transportation options to create a seamless experience for Indianapolis residents, workers, and visitors as they move around Marion County. And then within this overarching challenge question, there are 4 different opportunity areas, which are a little more specific areas of innovation that we identified through the research that we've done. So going through those, the first one is increasing access to jobs, healthcare, and education with multimodal options and street designs that complement Indigo service. And for those who might not be from Indianapolis, Indigo is the transit service that provides transportation around Indianapolis. The second opportunity area is enabling smart ways for residents to choose between mobility modes and expanding affordable options for low-income riders, with affordability being a key point here. The third opportunity area is enhancing experiences for residents with various disabilities or other challenges that inhibit their ability to move around easily. So we want this to we want you to interpret this very broadly in terms of what disabilities might mean, whether it might be physical or intellectual or any other type of disability that someone might have. And then opportunity area 4 is to expand the comfort and ease of travel for families and children during car-based trips. So with those high-level opportunity areas and challenge question in mind, I'll actually walk through the process of submitting an idea on the website. So the process is very straightforward. If you navigate to the challenge website, which is challenges.cityoftomorrow.com, with that City of Tomorrow URL being the name of last year's challenge. You click on your city's challenge, and right now we have the Mexico City challenge launched and the Indianapolis challenge launched. So you just simply navigate to the Indianapolis Challenge, which will bring you to the proposed phase page for Indianapolis. And this is where you can review your city's challenge brief. You can find the evaluation criteria, the opportunity areas, and all of the other information that I just reviewed. And then the last step is there's a little blue Add Your Idea button, which you just click and you can start to fill out your application. So what does the application look like? So we tried to make it very accessible and relatively simple to fill out. And so I'll walk through all the questions here and go into some parts that might be confusing and give a few tips as to how to fill out the application. So the first thing you're asked to do is to select the opportunity area that best fits your idea, or you can select other. You give your idea a catchy title. This will show up in the little thumbnail once you submit it. And then you give your idea a caption, which is more or less a Twitter length, 140 to 180 character limit that will appear under your title. So it should be just a concise summary of your idea. And then you can add an image or a video, which will serve as the thumbnail image on the website for your idea. So you might not be able to read all the text on this, but this is just some screen clippings of the actual application. So the first question that we ask in this bulky part of the application is to just explain what your solution is. And there is no character limit for this, so this is just a spot for you to tell us in as few words as possible, but to make it as clear as possible what your solution actually is and how it might help to address the challenge question or the opportunity area that you're addressing. Then we ask you to describe who is going to use your solution. So this is meant to be kind of it could be a customer journey or a user journey. Who is that going to be? What's their journey going to look like as they actually use your idea, your product or service? And one tip for this is, so as we evaluate applications, we want to look to see how specific and granular you are able to get with who in Indianapolis will actually be the one using your pilot. Since this is the Indianapolis Challenge, we want to make sure that applicants aren't just bringing in their prescriptive solutions, say there's an application from another country or another region of the US where they've deployed elsewhere, but we want to see how that solution can actually be tailored to the Indianapolis communities that will affect. Then we ask you to describe your solution stage of development all the way from the initial design up to fully scaled. And these are check boxes. So if you think your idea falls somewhere in between any of these ideas, you can check multiple boxes. Then we ask, do you have any insights from previous testing? If you've tested your idea with any users, or piloted your idea in the past, or done any other kind of customer discovery, what insights did you glean? Then we ask you to tell us about your team or organization. And this, we'll get into the evaluation criteria next, but this is really to gauge how feasible your solution is. Are you able to actually deploy this type of pilot in the real world? So do you have a team of individuals? Are you a startup? Are you a corporation or a firm, a community organization? Whatever type of group that you'll be working with to get this pilot on the ground. So we'd ask you to give us enough info to give us confidence that you'll be able to execute a pilot. But if you don't have a team, we'd ask that you demonstrate a reasonable plan for how you can create a team before you actually pilot. Then we ask a little more about your team, the size of your team, which is just a drop-down where you can select the size of your team. The funding request, which is in increments of $25,000. So you can request no funding all the way up to $100,000. And I want to point out too that this is just to be an initial rough estimate, and that if you're selected to move on to be a finalist, you'll have the option to propose multiple funding plans, meaning you could say, with $25,000, I would propose doing this pilot. With $75,000, I propose this pilot. So that's an option if you are selected to move on to be a finalist. Expanding a little more on the budget, the next question asks you to give us, with that requested funding amount, what is your rough budget for how you would actually spend that money? And I want to point out this is just a rough budget. Of course, during the refine phase, which is the period after the initial application period, you'll have about 6 or 7 weeks to refine your budget to make it more granular and more specific as to how you'd use the money. So this can just be a rough budget. We just want to make sure that you've put some thought into how this money would be used. The next question is describe how you would pilot the idea. So we want this to be specific enough in what you're testing that we have a good idea of what a pilot would actually look like. Some tips for this is it'd be helpful if you identified kind of your thinking and what you'd be trying to test. So if you're thinking you might be wanting to serve a specific kind of user, how would you use this pilot to test to see if that user would actually want or would be able to use your solution? Another thing I want to point out there is, so this application is just for a pilot, and this is not to develop a brand new product or service. So if you don't already have a product or service yet, how could you test the functionality without having to actually build a fully scaled product or service? The next question is to describe how you would measure the success of your pilot. And again, for this, we'd like you to be as specific as possible. So going from the last question, where you're coming up with a sort of hypothesis for what you'd like your pilot to test, how would you actually measure the success or measure the validity of your hypothesis? In addition to that, one other useful thing would be to identify things that your pilot could help the city learn that could advance their policy objectives. And then the last question is on the sustainability plan, which is essentially asking, can your idea be sustained after the pilot funding has dried up? So after your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 month pilot period, however long it is there a plan to generate any sort of funding or other mechanism in order to sustain your product or service and potentially even grow it? And that could be, a revenue model, that could be getting additional funding or partnering with a nonprofit, just any path towards creating a sustainable product or service. And that's it for the application. And then once you've filled all that out, you can click Save and Publish, the blue button at the bottom. And I do want to point out that once you click that, it will be publicly viewable on the Propose Phase page. But you're also able to edit it at any point up until the application deadline on July 23rd. So these evaluation criteria are how your applications will be evaluated. So we're using the desirable, feasible, and viable framework, and I don't need to get into all the questions here because this is on the website, but essentially for each one. So for desirability, we want to really know who your pilot is meant to help. And is there a clear user need? Regarding feasibility, we want to know if your pilot can actually be deployed with just up to $100,000 with funding, and also within the time frame of 6 months. So again, this money is not meant to be used to build a new product or service from the ground up, unless you can do that within a 6-month period. Another aspect of feasibility is is your pilot operational within the existing transportation system? So this would be I'll get into the supplemental resources after this, but this would be a spot where you where some outside research and looking at some of our research would really be able to help to know what Indianapolis's existing transportation system looks like. And then lastly, viable, and this is really gauged by that last question of the application. Is there a clear customer and a pathway to a sustainable service model after the pilot period concludes? So those, I want to be really clear that those are the evaluation criteria that the judges and the steering committee will use to evaluate your applications. And then in addition to those, these preferences may be given to proposals that demonstrate these qualities. So these are qualities that are specifically asked for by our partners at Indianapolis. So one of those is solutions for all. Is there a mechanism for furthering mobility solutions that maximize the full integration of people with disabilities and conditions of aging into the community? Then there's the aspect of equity. Is there a mechanism for ensuring equity in the pilot by creating services accessible for people of different abilities or socioeconomic barriers to movement? Community buy-in. Is there a mechanism for confirming that the community has buy-in of the pilot? Making sure that the community actually wants this to happen and working with them in the piloting and the planning for the pilot to make sure that the community is on board. And then lastly, is there a mechanism for creating economic value, whether it's by jobs or some other creative mechanism for creating economic value in the community? So I've been going through a lot, and I want to point out that the brief report is a very comprehensive summary of the research that we did during the Explore phase. And this will be made available on the website starting today. So we're really excited to be able to launch this, and this will be really supportive of your applications as you begin to develop those and tailor them to the Indianapolis community. So there's 3 parts to this report, where the first part is just the overview of the Indianapolis Challenge, which I brought you through, and then taking you through the Explore phase summary and the findings. So these are findings from qualitative and quantitative surveys, from analytics, from shadowing and interviews with Indianapolis residents. So this is going to be really a gold mine of information that can help you build out those questions in the application, like who is your user going to be? And then again, there's the proposed phase instructions, which I just walked you through. So this brief report will be really helpful in understanding what the Indianapolis ecosystem looks like. In addition to that, there's some other resources, and these are all in the challenge brief. On the left side of the screen, you have some of the Indianapolis open data sites and the Indigo transit plan. So you have an idea of what kinds of things they're thinking about, which can help you identify how your proposed pilot could potentially integrate into their planning. On the right side, we have existing mobility assets, meaning if you think back to that feasibility part of the evaluation criteria, understanding what that existing transportation system looks like is key to developing a great proposal. So these are some of the existing services that are provided in Indianapolis. And this will be posted on the website and shared after the call as well. So this will be available to you. Some innovation toolkits are here if you're interested in learning more about innovation and design. There are some cool tools here that could be useful for thinking through your customer and user journey. And then lastly, there's the research and community resources that are available on the websites, on our website. So this includes blogs, the summaries of the analytics and the research, So this is all information that would be contained in the report. And then looking at some of the contributions that we received during the Explore phase. Okay, so if some of you have seen the challenge brief on the website, this is linked to on the Indianapolis proposed phase page, but this is a summary of really everything we just went through. So it contains the challenge question, the opportunity areas, evaluation criteria, supplemental resources. So it's really your one-stop shop. It's only five or six pages of information compared to the report, which is many dozens of pages. And it's really, again, a goldmine of useful information. But this brief is really to give you a high-level look at what the Indianapolis Challenge is. So to get to the brief, again, you just go to the Indianapolis landing page, and if you click the Submit Your Proposal button, and then navigate to the Challenge Brief hyperlink, that'll take you to a PDF, which you can download. And some final things to note, to start with some assumptions, that solutions should not require the expansion of city services, routes, or frequency. So understanding that a lot of transportation services offered in Indianapolis are, they may be resource strapped, and there might not be the feasibility of being able to change the existing routes and frequencies that are offered. Solutions should also be able to be piloted within the current city infrastructure using the assets that are already existing in the city, and that the solution providers should work within existing regulations and ordinances, meaning it would be helpful if you were aware of what those regulations might be. But this is also something that could be worked on during the refine phase if you are selected to move on as a finalist. And to finish us off with some tips, as I mentioned, even after you save and publish your application, you can continue to update your application through July 23rd. And there are a number of documents in the supplemental resources, which I went through quickly earlier. And then each application will be judged against the evaluation criteria. So I really emphasize that you should study those well and make sure that your written application addresses all of those, as that is how your application will be judged. And with that, want to give a quick thank you to everyone for listening to me talk for the last 20 or 25 minutes. I appreciate that. And now we can get into a Q&A. Okay, so we'll start with a question on the stipends for finalists. So as I mentioned earlier, the stipend of $2,500 will go to each finalist with the expectation that they'll use this funding to help develop a detailed pilot proposal and to use as travel as necessary to the events that we have during the refine phase. And then the other expectation for receiving this stipend is that all finalists will submit a full proposal at the end of the refine phase. All right, we have another question on the funding amounts. So to be clear, in the initial application, you can request funding in increments of $25,000, starting with no funding up to $100,000. So we just, in the initial application, we just use this to make sure that you understand the feasibility of deploying your proposed pilot within that $100,000 limit. And then we also ask for that rough budget of how you would use that money. But again, during the refine phase, the finalists will have the opportunity to submit multiple requests for funding, where if you request $25,000 for one type of pilot, then you could also request $50,000 for a larger scale pilot, $75,000 for a even larger scale pilot, etc. so that we could potentially do a mixing and matching of pilots. Okay, if there are any other questions, you can submit them to the chat. Okay, Ron, is there any points that you think that you want to emphasize, or that you'd like to cover based on everything we just went through?
No, Mike, I think it was a great job and a great outline of the issues that we care most deeply about. And again, we're just grateful for your participation today and your consideration of innovative, creative ways to help people solve their personal mobility needs in Indianapolis as a way of helping to promote better quality of life for them, and better community for all of us.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions, thank you so much for coming and for calling in. This will be posted again. This recording will be posted to the website following the call. And if you have further questions that you might think of after the call, please do feel free to email us at city1@ford.com. And you can go to the challenge website at www.cityoftomorrow.com, or sorry, www.challenges.cityoftomorrow.com. Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming, and have a great rest of your day.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Just real quick, it looks like another question might have just popped up about the bike share system. Not sure I fully understand the question. Is the question, Robert, whether the Pacers bike share program has any bicycles for persons who require wheelchairs or need wheelchair access?
No, that would be correct. He was and facing issues such as wheel.
It's a little hard to hear you, Robert, but Ron, I think that's how I interpreted the question as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Robert. The audio was not really very clear, but the answer is no. Bike share, to my understanding, only has available two-wheeled bikes. I do not believe that there are either three-wheeled bikes or bicycles that are accessible for persons who need wheelchairs.
And Robert, if that's not what your question meant, please feel free to email us at city1@ford.com with a clarification around your question.
All right, Mike. Well, thanks very much. It was a great job.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. And again, thank you everyone for coming, and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.